Hello everyone, this is WarriorDan and welcome back to another episode of What is the Point Of? The series where I analyze, discuss, and critique individual titles that happen to strike me as interesting, either for excelling for some reason or another, or due to their apparent and deep-rooted flaws. With the gaming industry, it's kind of a mixed bag. I mean, some days you get lucky, and some days you don't. I don't know about you, but I'd rather get lucky than not. And that applies to a variety of contexts, I suppose. But today, as you might have guessed from the title and accompanying thumbnail, we are reviewing A Hat in Time. Now, if you've not heard of A Hat in Time already, that's not altogether surprising. A Hat in Time is a indie third-person platformer developed and published by Gears for Breakfast, a small indie studio, and the game is, as of now, the studio's only title. It's a game that may have escaped attention from the mainstream media, but it has quickly attained a fairly large cult following and was widely met with online praise. Currently holding a 98% average score on Steam, comprised from over 7,000 reviews. All in all, that's not a bad score and even outpaces some of Valve's own titles in terms of score. So the question of the day is, does A Hat in Time warrant this positive acclaim? Spoiler alert, yes it does. But before we get more into that, let's go back to the beginning. I think it's safe to say that platformers as a genre once held a fairly noticeable place within the gaming industry, to the point where after the emergence of one fat Italian plumber I'm electing not to mention, game publishers arguably maintained a chokehold on those developers, attempting to create an experiment outside the platformer genre. However, the era of platformers is long and past, and the reach of said genre never really extended to the PC market, instead choosing to remain largely a console-only supported genre. Even on consoles though, aside from a few already established franchises, the number of new platforming titles took a bit of a nosedive in recent years. Naturally, as a result, many players, especially PC players, have developed a nostalgia for classic platforming titles, leading to a slight re-emergence of 3D platformers within the indie scene, such as Yooka-Laylee and of course A Hat in Time. A Hat in Time initially emerged on Kickstarter on May 29, 2013, with a fundraising goal of $30,000 USD, and within the first 48 hours managed somehow to double this goal, before eventually going on to raise over $296,000, almost 1,000 times its initial budget, making it the most successful 3D platformer Kickstarter of all time, as of the time of recording. Fast forward to today, and we have A Hat in Time, initially released on October 15, 2017, and has since remained a evolving title, with new PC updates and console ports continuing to release at a steady rate. After recently acquiring the game in one of my monthly Humble Bundle packages, shout out to Humble Bundle by the way, I felt it would be worth my time, and by extension your time, to break down and analyze A Hat in Time. So without further ado, now that we've gotten out the history of the game, let's get into actually reviewing the game. In A Hat in Time, you assume the role of the appropriately named Hat Kid, an alien girl trying to fly back to her homeworld in her spaceship until, like the Man of Steel, you're forced to crash land on a nearby planet, in this case after the Mafia don't take kindly to you not paying a toll for passing through their airspace, and subsequently they deal quite significant damage to your ship, causing your supply of hourglasses, your fuel for lack of a better term, to be scattered across the several worlds present within the game, forcing you to hunt down them all in order to restore power to your ship and continue on your journey. Mafia City acts as the first of many playable semi-open world sandboxes the player will have access to over the course of the game. While the game is presented in linear fashion with individually designed levels, the player is granted a large degree of flexibility over how they decide to interact with the environment, with many interactable NPCs, multi-layered buildings, and climbable objects, allowing for a fair bit of verticality, which can vary from level to level. Now, before anyone here starts claiming that A Hat in Time is just an indie ripoff of the recent Super Mario Odyssey, keep in mind that A Hat in Time was released on October 5, 2017, with Super Mario Odyssey following several weeks later on October 27, 2017. And Odyssey's development began in November 2013, following the release of Super Mario 3D World, whereas development on A Hat in Time began during the summer of 2012. So by all accounts, you could argue that Super Mario Odyssey is a bit of a ripoff of A Hat in Time. Now, joking aside, the comparison is fair as both games do feature similarly unique hat abilities, as well as classic RPG-like text dialogue interactions, a mute protagonist who mainly communicates using specific grunts and other non-traditional verbal cues, a multi-world travel and gameplay format, and the reoccurring gameplay mechanic of collectible items doubling as story plots, allowing the player to travel closer and closer towards the inevitable endgame. but once you isolate these specific common denominators, the differences between these two games are fairly vast. Among other elements, one clear difference is how each game approaches humor. While both games' respective senses of humor rely around how NPCs and other broader world elements interact with the player, Mario's humor is fairly simplistic and usually relies hard on slapstick or references to past events or cliches featured prominently in past entries of the series. Whereas A Hat in Time introduces a mix of pop culture jokes and references, dry snarky social commentary, and the occasional fourth wall breaking humor, similar in nature to other indie titles such as the Stanley Parable. The game is very self-aware and often employs the use of this fourth wall breaking humor, some of which can occasionally be a little too on the nose. But as with any use of humor, this is entirely subjective and really just comes down to your own personal preference regarding humor. Odds are for younger players, a lot of the jokes and references featured here in A Hat in Time may go completely over their heads, but for adult gamers having grown up during the 80s or 90s, there's not many instances where a joke or reference will likely go unnoticed. And for the most part, a lot of this can be prominently observed in the background environment, or as part of a one-off dialogue bubble from an NPC. After completing a series of levels, the player will be forced to engage in a one-on-one boss fight, complete with over-the-top set pieces, unique boss attacks, dialogue interactions, and character animations. For those of you that enjoyed the look and feel of the boss fights in Cuphead, but want to enjoy said boss fights at a comparatively decreased difficulty scale, A Hat in Time can act as a highly enjoyable stand-in. That said, the actual combat works out to be much more similar to the Mario games, where indirect environmental attacks play a more critical role as opposed to button mashing your basic attacks, or alternatively, attempting to string excessively complicated combos. From a control input perspective, A Hat in Time is wonderfully optimized for mouse and keyboard controls, in addition to third-party controller support. That said, there does not seem to be any direct support for key rebinding, so for those of you who are looking to customize your keyboard input settings, sadly you might be out of luck here. Players can collect in-game currency in order to buy new character abilities from NPC traders, and unlike in most other games these days, this in-game currency cannot be otherwise acquired using real-life currency, only through in-game grinding, so there's no pay-to-win mechanics here. As with most retro platformers, the player's health is displayed as an on-screen heart, featured in the top left corner of the screen as opposed to a more modern health meter. One final feature I want to touch on and give the developers credit for, since most developers, either for creative reasons or because they're too incompetent to implement it, that being Steam Workshop support. After doing some initial research on the implementation of Steam Workshop, by going back and reading some extensive Steamworks documentation, initially intended for Steam game developers, the process for implementing Steam Workshop support for a game is not as inherently difficult as one would initially surmise. Games on Steam looking to implement Steam Workshop support must decide which of two forms of Workshop they wish to enable. These options either being a ready-to-use Workshop, where players can freely upload and download community-generated content without any direct need for developer oversight or moderation, and the second option being a curated Workshop, where users can upload community-generated content, but said content cannot then be downloaded by other users, but the choice is then given to the developer as to what specific community content ought to be made available in-game. Said items can only then be made accessible in-game via a subsequent game update from said developer. A Hat in Time, luckily in this case, chooses the former option, granting players carte blanche control over their gameplay experience through the use of community-generated mods, something that in my opinion definitely warrants praise and has helped foster a lasting community that has seemingly dedicated itself in turn towards supporting the game via its follow-up paid DLC and through buying its accompanying soundtrack, all of which are available on the game's Steam page. Once again, as more developers ought to learn by now, where possible it is to your advantage to involve your community in your development process, and upon release, provide players with the appropriate tools to create their own unique experiences within said title, whether it be mod support, dedicated photo modes, replay functionality, an extensive options menu, etc. If you as a developer put in the effort to support your community, more often than not, your community will in turn collectively make more of an active effort to support you and your future endeavors. My final score for A Hat in Time is a 10 out of 10. This does not mean that the game is flawless by any means, but simply that it stands out as one of the best current examples of its genre. I can't remember the last time I've had so much fun playing a retro-style platformer like this. and I do hope the developers behind A Hat in Time continue to produce new content and new technical updates supporting the game for the foreseeable future. That said, this is a game that definitely merits a sequel, and that would be one sequel I would definitely be interested in seeing come to life. But that's where I'm going to wrap it up for the day. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do toss this video a like, it does help out the channel quite a bit, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this from me here in the future. I'm looking forward to doing more What Is the Point Ofs. These videos definitely take some time to make, but I enjoy making them, so I plan to continue doing so for the foreseeable future. This is WarriorDan signing out. Stay awesome everybody, and peace out.